What an incredible third season of Literacy Matters Empowered Conversations. You know, when we started Literacy Matters Empowered Conversations 3 seasons ago, it was our hope to support educators when they really needed it the most and to provide a learning platform that makes an impact in the learning that takes place in our classrooms and in our homes. I want to thank our incredible thought leaders from this season for sharing their insights and brilliance to inspire thoughtful and difference-making teaching and learning. So we wanted to take a look back at some really impactful clips and answer your questions that you asked us on social media. So let's get started with a question from Pam Brock. Pam asked, "How can I tell if my child is struggling with reading and what should I do?" Well, Pam, this is really a great question. I think the most important thing is to make sure that you are listening to your child read and be sure to pay attention to see if your child is reading super slowly or having difficulty sounding out words. I want you to notice how they are attending to the words they're reading on the page and take note if they are guessing or skipping words. And also be mindful if your child is avoiding reading altogether. Now, if you find that your child is doing some or all of these things, your child may have difficulty reading. But don't be discouraged, Pam. Your child may just need extra support, a little more time. Consider talking with your child's teacher and ask about reading interventions to support your child. Now, when I think about ways to support our children, it brings me back to episode 10 with Dr. Molly Ness, who talks about the power of us reading aloud to our children, even if they are older. Let's listen.
As we read aloud to kids of all ages across all different content areas, we build their language comprehension. We build their ability to use language. And we have some pretty compelling data that shows that kids' listening comprehension outpaces their reading comprehension until about age 13 or 14, so about 7th or 8th grade. So this to me is this reminder that when we read aloud to kids, we need to be reading aloud from sophisticated text that is typically higher than their grade level because it gives them access to background knowledge and vocabulary and text structures and language usage that they would not otherwise be able to access on their own.
Okay, we have another question from Mark Humphrey. Mark wants to know, what's the most important thing teachers should focus on during literacy lessons? Well, Mark, the heart of strong literacy lessons really lies in explicit instruction and meaningful practice. A strong phonics foundation paired with reading and writing connections is an excellent recipe for success. That makes me think of our guest, Kareem Weaver, from episode 3, who says, "Love is the most important ingredient to any lesson plan." Let's listen as he reminds us of the 5 critical elements of an effective reading program.
It's been almost 30 years since they put out their elements of an effective reading program and talked about evidence-based practices and the science behind how we learn to read. And they listed 5 critical elements. And I've gone around the country, I'm telling you, people tell me, yes, we've started this, we're doing the science of reading thing. But when you ask them about the specific elements, 2, 1.5, at most 2.5 of those things are done. Strong core reading curriculum that's aligned to the research consensus and that's usable within the bounds of their structures in the teacher contract. Instructional materials aligned with the research, that's the second one. Appropriate reading assessments. Timely intervention for struggling kids. That means we're not going to do a wait to fail model. We're going to have it timely and then high quality professional development. Those are just the basics. That's 5 basics.
On Literacy Matters, we talk about all things literacy. That's reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Layla has a question for us about writing. Layla wants to know if we have any advice for helping kids who feel frustrated or overwhelmed by writing. Well, Layla, I hear this a lot. So I want you to start by making writing fun and approachable. Use prompts or let them draw first. Celebrate their efforts, even if it's just a sentence or 2. Progress builds confident writers. Our guest from episode 6, Dr. Karen Harris, also reminds us of the importance of handwriting to putting our ideas to paper.
If you don't get fluent in either print or cursive, you are going to have a great deal more difficulty writing content. And the reason is what's called cognitive load. When students are thinking about letter formation, stroke by stroke, and trying to remember how to do it and working hard to do it, it's difficult for them to recollect and keep thinking about what they want to say, how they want to say it.
Well, now let's hear our final question from Janet Mell. Janet wants to know, how can parents support early literacy at home if they don't have much time? Well, Janet, even 5 minutes can make a difference. Practice letter sounds on a drive, or talk about your day to build vocabulary, or read a short bedtime story. It all adds up. Our guest, Spencer Russell from episode 9, reminds us that families can be efficient and fun when teaching literacy skills at home.
I like starting with letter sounds. The reason why is because it is very easy to make it fun, and you get really, really quick wins for the kid.
Yeah.
So teachers, you've got to pay attention to your curriculum, to your scope and sequence. I don't want to negate any of that. This is easier for me to recommend to parents or homeschool parents who have some flexibility. But when you're teaching kids letter sounds, a lot of people will kind of just do the ABC song or teach the full alphabet and try and do all of these. I like to start with like 2 or 3 sounds at a time and just teach those until the kid knows them.
Sure.
I like doing games, like jumping on them or throwing them or stomping them or coloring them. We had a kid over here last week who plays football, and so he's a quarterback. I held them up and he's saying the sounds, throwing the football at the sounds. You can do anything, but you can get most kids mastering 3 to 4 to 5 letter sounds in a week, feeling that progress, feeling that success, looking forward to the time. And then you can begin to kind of build in some blending work, build in some of that phonemic awareness once you've got the kind of bones of the routine. But I really like leading with kind of like psychology. And honestly, from the parent perspective too, there's a hurdle for people to get started. Sometimes it's the kids got the hurdle and they don't want to do it. Often it's the parent. So if we start with the easiest, lowest hanging fruit, something that's going to help them read, and then we start to build in more and more into that routine, I think that's a really approachable way for a lot of people to enter this. Now, if you do feel really confident, you can start with a really structured lesson and you can do some work with phonemic awareness, different skills like blending and segmenting. Then you can move to some of the letter sounds and begin to combine them together. But I like to think of a reading routine with parents as like little blocks. Let's do a sound block. Let's work on phonics. Once we've got that block under control, let's add a second block. And if we've got that block under control, maybe we add a third block.
Sure.
Where we're starting to do some dictation, where they're actually starting to spell and write those things down. But I'm not jumping there until we've got kind of the easier, more basic blocks covered. There's nothing special about us as teachers other than at some point someone invested in and trained and coached us. That helps us to make that shift to invest in, train, and coach our parents, because it is much easier, much better, much more effective, and much more longer lasting over the tail of a kid's academic career to have the family involved than it is to kind of pass from teacher to teacher, hoping that every teacher knocks it out of the park.
Thank you to everyone who shared your questions and insights. It's what makes Literacy Matters Empowered Conversations so incredibly special. Be sure to catch all of the episodes from Season 3 and join us next season for even more empowered conversations. We all get better, smarter, and stronger when we engage in empowered conversations about literacy.